Welcome, everybody. This is the Full Court Press. Cal Lee from the baseline as we discuss the hot button topics of the NBA, and we do it with some of the premier writers and bloggers in the media going on today. And man, this week has been crazy to say the least. It's just been absolutely nuts. I mean, so much to the so that the beat has to skip because it can't believe the craziness that's been going on. Man, I'm telling you, as we approach ourselves to the NBA draft, it's getting hectic. It's getting hot. Teams are now positioning themselves, and their GMs that are clamoring at the bit to have an opportunity to get at some of the premier free agents that are now declaring to opt out. Two of which of great importance. One being Carmelo Anthony. Earlier this week, he decided he wants to opt out. He's basically throwing it up in the air. He is now open to the highest bidder. But really, in a not so surprising, yet somewhat surprising situation, LeBron James, he decides that he is opting out. There were many sources that said that the agent for LeBron James contacted the Miami Heat organization with intentions that earlier this week, this past Monday, he has decided to opt out. And so I decided that we needed to get a guy who's close to the source, who's kind of like riding on the coattails of the Miami Heat, and also with the status of LeBron James and what the strategy is going to be. I got our man, Diego Quezada from High Hop Hoops. He is one of the illest writers that's going out there. Make sure that you catch my man on the NBA tip. Diego, what's going on, my friend?
It's going well. It's going well. I've been checking NBA Twitter all the time, and it seems like every time I check it, there is a new story. I just was looking on about the Ashik trade. It seems like the NBA is in full off-season mode. It seems like there's a lot of stuff going on right now. It's all good.
Everybody seems to be, waiting for what's going to happen by the time we get to the NBA draft, or by the time that we get to the first day of free agency.
Mm-hmm.
Listen, players and the upper management for these organizations, they're not trying to wait. Their road to a championship, their road to back to being a prominent basketball team, whichever the organizations are, it started the moment that they got knocked out of the playoffs. And for the Miami Heat, the moment of retooling, quote unquote, as Pat Riley had said in his press conference, his moment of retooling began the moment that he got off that podium and was awaiting the word on the statuses for the big three. And one of them, in LeBron James, has decided, you know what? I'm going to go ahead and opt out. I want to see, what's going on. Let me first ask you this question. LeBron James deciding to opt out, make himself available in this 2014 year, is that business, or do you think that there's really something going on with what happened to him losing in the finals and between him and Pat Riley and the Miami Heat organization?
I think it is mostly business. You look at a guy like James, who's 29 years old, I think, 4-time MVP, 2-time champion, 2-time Finals MVP, and he knew that he could get another max contract if he signed one on July 1st. He couldn't sign it, but if he agreed to it on that first day of the month, and that was the same position that he was in 4 years ago when we had this crazy offseason again. So I think it was mostly business. I know there was some speculation about maybe he might opt in for one more year and just roll it forward for 1 year. So that's where I think the idea of maybe the Heat losing. I know that he gave an interview, I think it was around the All-Star break of this past season, and he said that he couldn't imagine leaving the Heat if they won 3 straight titles. Obviously, that did not occur. So I did think the fact that they lost 3 straight games in blowout fashion may have influenced him to opt out instead of opting in for 1 more year. But I do think this was mostly about the fact that he knew that he could still sign another max contract. He can get the full 5 years in the new CBA, and he doesn't have to wait 2 more years to get that max contract and to get that max money.
It's interesting when we talk about guys that go this route of opting out in the year before their final year, having that option in the clause.
Mm-hmm.
People often mistake this as a means to say, well, it's strictly about the money. Like right now, everyone's perception with Carmelo Anthony, with his decision to opt out, is for the simple fact that, well, he just wants to win a championship. But I think that there's a reason why that clause is in place for these guys. There's not too many things that a player has, quote unquote, the freedom when it comes to being an employee of the NBA, so to speak, or being an employee of their franchise. And when you're someone as talented and a superstar and legendary status as LeBron James, to have that empowerment, I think it would be often foolish not to be able to exercise that, but exercise it with prudence. Now, LeBron James did this 4 years ago. He didn't exercise prudence. The way that he carried himself made him look worse for his decision making to opt out and to basically leave the situation to the status as it was. What is it that you saw from how LeBron James has handled this process with his intent to opt out, that if, let's say, you, Diego, were part of the Miami Heat GM, you have the utmost confidence that you're going to be able to reel him in and not let teams like the New York Knicks or the Houston Rockets or other teams that are going to make a serious play to try and pull his services to their organization?
So I feel like for him 4 years ago, I mean, you have to understand that he was being asked all through that 2010 year, what are you going to do? What are you going to do? What are you going to do? And I think finally he did say, I'm not going to answer any more questions. But everyone knew that he was going to opt out. And then when he started saying, I'm going to take all these meetings with these teams in Akron, I'm going to have this TV special, it did so, and you alluded to it, that it did, result in him not acting prudently. It was not good for his brand. But as to answer your question, if I'm the Miami Heat, what I try to say is, look at what we've done for you these past 4 years. We've had you grown as a player. You were not a post player before you came, and I know that you did work with Hakeem in that offseason, but we were a part of that because we put you in those situations. We had David Fizdale, an assistant coach, who, by the way, I think could be a head coach one day. And he was working with him in the post day in and day out. We've given you players. I know that the last season doesn't make it seem like that, but we signed Shane Battier, who was very key in 2 championships. Ray Allen, very key. And in fact, he said that he's leaning towards playing, and he wants to play with LeBron James in Miami. They have 2 of their good friends in Wade and Bosh. So if I was Miami Heat, my pitch would be, we've been good to you. We want to continue being good to you, but what we need is you to sign on this dotted line, and we need you and possibly also Wade and Bosh, if they also do want to stay in Miami, to consider what do they do in terms of taking a bit of a haircut on the salaries in terms of getting new, fresher legs into the Miami Heat roster, so that they can continue competing for championships in this new CBA, which does impose more penalties for teams that are paying more. So that's why you're saying, the new CBA does say if you're this much over the luxury tax, you have to pay this much more. So because of the new reality that we're living in, we need players to take a little bit of a pay cut, and that's just the world that we live in.
When you look at how Pat Riley had laid it flat out, and he said, listen, this is the status. This is where we are at. We'd be foolish, not to tell you that we're not expecting, to sign a team and put together greatness like all these other teams are trying to throw money around. Pat Riley, he's judicious. He has a strategy in place. I think a lot of people kind of took his quote-unquote press conference, the tirade that everyone makes it want to sound like, that's just him. That's the State of the Union of the Miami Heat with Pat. That would have been the State of the Union if Pat Riley was the president of basketball operations for the Milwaukee Bucks. And I guarantee you probably would have said it with a much different tone if we're talking about the Milwaukee Bucks. But, with the Miami Heat, and we had talked about this just before we jumped on the air, what about this big 3? Everybody has made much about this big 3. So the fact that LeBron James decides to opt out of the big 3, where if you look at it, he's obviously the most talented. He is the one that holds really the quote-unquote Hall of Fame status in the palm of his hands. It's not like you can't say the same thing about Dwayne Wade. It's not like you can't say the same thing about Chris Bosh, who could eventually put himself into that kind of stratosphere. But what I'm saying is that him doing it now does what to the other 2 of this big 3? Because I know that you had indicated before that if the intent was to get these three guys back in there, it really does still alter the perception about how good could this Miami Heat team still become because of the fact that they could still be financially strapped even with the haircut.
Yeah, so I feel like the Heat, the big three, all met up in a restaurant in South Florida earlier tonight. I think if this goes on the air in the morning, it'll be last night. But they all talked about their future. What we know, what we don't know is what they talked about, and this was already known. So everyone's making a big deal about it on Twitter. But we knew Woj said it on Twitter when he opted out that the three of them were going to sit down and talk about their future, just like they did talk about their future in 2010. And in terms of the big three, what I think it comes down to is, you know, you mentioned Bosh coming back, Wade as well. What this is about is, do you want to keep the big three together? Wade, right after they lost in the finals, did tweet an Instagram photo of the big three saying, you know, I'm going to stick by my teammates. It's us three and then 12 more guys. So I do think there is a little bit of an impetus, a motivation to keep the big three together just because they're friends. They've been together for 4 years. I think there is a sense that they do want to keep it going. But the idea is what happens from here on out. And I would say the thing that would give me a good idea of the three of them sticking together is if Wade and Bosh both announce tomorrow morning, or it could be even in the afternoon after the World Cup game, that Wade and Bosh are both opting out as well. Because if that happened, then you would have had a meeting last night, and then the next day they would have also opted out. That would signal to me, and maybe this is totally wrong by me, it's just pure speculation, but it would signal to to me that they have come to some sort of agreement about who they or what they plan to do and who they also want to add. I mean, 4 years ago, the big three wanted to take pay cuts so that Mike Miller and Udonis Haslem could also come to the team under the Heat's salary cap. So we don't know. Do the Heat also have a couple of free agents who they'd also like to get? I've heard Kyle Lowry's name mentioned, but we also know that, according to Chad Ford, they are interested in moving up in the draft to get Shabazz Napier. Do they want to get a big guy in the draft to help out inside? So we have to see. I mean, we're still dealing with an incomplete picture as of now. I don't think that we'll really know for sure until we hear what Wade and Bosh do in terms of their opting in or opting out.
All right, let me give you a hypothetical scenario to look at real quick.
Yeah.
You know, because you had mentioned the fact that the Miami Heat now is eyeing Shabazz Napier. And the reason why they're eyeing Shabazz Napier, and I believe that you had mentioned this, is the fact that LeBron James has been quoted as saying he really likes this kid's game. And he thinks that he can definitely fit in the picture when we're talking about him still being a part of the Miami Heat. Now, you're the Miami Heat. You're Pat Riley. And you are now coming into the draft. If you are LeBron James and you opt out prior to the draft, does that alter the Miami Heat's priorities in how they go about selecting the talent that they think is necessary to help rebuild, or in this case, as Pat Riley has said, retool? Because now you're looking at a guard who appeases LeBron James. Might not necessarily be to help the Miami Heat continue to be a successful basketball team, because, again, there is no guarantee that LeBron James stays. And to your point, you are mentioning the fact that the only way that we really can see a complete picture is if we understand the status of Dwayne Wade and Chris Bosh. So if you are the Miami Heat, and, you know, again, my hypothetical to you is, do you feel that the Miami Heat is changing more to appease LeBron James rather than changing in order to make sure that they're still putting together a quality basketball team that can compete at a high level?
Yeah, so two answers. First of all, I think that the Heat are taking into account what LeBron James thinks in what they're doing. I think that they are considering that James has said that he likes this point guard in their thinking, and we've seen Spoelstra, in terms of the game planning side, has been willing to take some of his ideas in terms of starting players or bringing people off the bench, bringing in Norris Cole, bringing in James Jones. So I did think that level of respect is there, and I mean the Heat also did that, as I mentioned earlier, with Mike Miller. He was a good friend of James, and the Heat wanted to get him as well. He was a roommate of Haslam's. The Heat also traded for Quentin Richardson back in 2009 when no other team wanted him because he was very good friends with Dwayne Wade. So I do think that it is altering their idea of what to do to go into the draft. The Heat's lead scout did say a couple of days ago that the Heat were just looking for an NBA-ready prospect at the 26th pick. Now, maybe because LeBron opted out, they're sort of feeling an impetus to trade up in the draft to try to get this guy, who is, by the way, invited to the green room, is probably not going to be there at 26. I'm hearing that he probably won't be past 21. But on the other hand, I don't think that this is really about appeasing James or working with the Miami Heat. I think that those aren't mutually exclusive.
Okay.
So I feel like you can get a player who LeBron wants and also build a championship team. I have not seen Napier play that much, to be honest with you. I've looked at his Draft Express video, which is very comprehensive. It's people who know what they're talking about in terms of college basketball. I defer to the experts on this issue. I don't watch college basketball, but they do. And one thing that I do like about him is that he has NBA three-point range. That's obviously a plus because when you're playing on the Miami Heat, you need to have that three-point range to stretch the floor. I like the fact that they say that he can push the ball in transition. I think that's a key thing. But on the other hand, I think they said that one of his weaknesses is that he doesn't really have some. I think they said he was an inconsistent defensive player, and that sometimes he can't contain dribble penetration. Now, if you're in the NBA and you're dealing with all these high top flight point guards, that's not going to be very good. So, I mean, like I said, I haven't seen him play, but I do think that they're not mutually exclusive. But I do think that they are incorporating what he's said, and I think, as I've listed, that they've done it in the past, and it hasn't really been a bad thing.
You tune to the Full Court Press, and we have our special guest, Diego Quezada, who is a beat writer for the Miami Heat. And you can catch his articles and his blogs and posts on Hot Hoops. Diego, big picture, okay?
Mm-hmm.
What happens should the Miami Heat have the luxury of having the big three can opt in? Do the Miami Heat literally stand as contenders once again in the Eastern Conference if they choose to come back together? Or is it, really a pipe dream that we saw the best of what they had to offer in this 4-year stretch, and that by them opting in and getting back together again for however long the period should or would be, that it doesn't necessarily guarantee that these guys could play with the same kind of dominance?
Well, I think we have to see what happens in the rest of the Eastern Conference. I mean, there's a lot of talk about Melo is thinking that the Chicago Bulls are his top destination right now. At least that's what the people are saying. So if they sign him, some people were talking about this earlier, maybe them getting Aaron Aflalo, that could get them a potentially very good starting five, and they'd obviously have to amnesty Carlos Boozer, make some other moves to do that. But we have to see what the other teams do. Derrick Rose hasn't really had a healthy year in 3 years. Is he going to come back at that MVP level that we saw in 2010, 2011? So I do think that we have to see what the other teams do. It's not just the Bulls, but also we have to see if the Pacers are going to do anything. They played the Heat for 3 straight years in the finals. Do they retool? Lance Stevenson is an unrestricted free agent. Do they try to keep him, or do they try to maybe sign and trade him, get something back for him? But in terms of your question, I do think that the Heat do need to retool around the big three, even if they sign them back. And the areas that I think are, you need to upgrade your point guard. You need to have some help in the wing position, even if Ray Allen comes back, because Shane Batty is gone, because Mike Miller was gone. I mean, you have some players there like James Jones and Rashard Lewis, but those players are just pretty much three-point shooters who can't really do a whole lot else. So I think maybe you need to get a wing player who can come off the bench. And then the other thing that I think they need is some help in the front court in terms of getting a good power forward or center that can really help out, especially considering that Chris Anderson, Birdman, is going to be 36 this year. So I think those are the three areas. You can definitely solve one of them in the draft. I mean, if they draft Napier, and I think it was Chad Ford who said that they might use the 26th pick and Norris Cole in a trade to move up maybe to the mid-teens or the late teens in the draft. If that happens, then you might want to consider re-signing Mario Chalmers and having him be your backup, or maybe having the two of them compete for the starting spot and see who comes out on top. But then we also have to see, do you draft? I mean, if you don't get to move up in the draft, do you stay where you are and draft a big man or a wing player? But the other thing that I want to throw out there is that if the Heat can't move up in the draft, I think you could see them trade down in the draft early in the second round, because first round picks have cap holds, they have a guaranteed salary, you need to pay them, whereas second round picks, you can pay them much less, under $1 million for that first year, and they don't have a cap hold. It's what the Heat did in 2010. They traded out of the first round, and they had more space to sign the big three, Mike Miller and UD, and they were able to sign Dexter Pittman for a very low salary, at least by the NBA's standards. So I do think if the Heat can't move up in the draft, they may say, you know what, we're at 26. If we go down to 32, we still might have the player that we want at 32, and we'll be able to sign him for much less money. So I think there's a lot of stuff that's very fluid, and we'll only have to wait until 24 hours from now, and even later, to see.
That's my man Diego Quezada. You can catch him on the Twitter feed. Make sure that you get him at Diego Heat NBA. Diego, you bring up some excellent points, and I have to agree with you definitely. If you are the Miami Heat, you don't have that kind of cap flexibility with the players that you currently have. So clearly, if you're not intending to get the player that you want, and in this case, what you're indicating, and basically by where Chad Ford was also indicating via tweet, that Shabazz Napier may not be where their landing spot is currently at the moment. If they cannot figure out a way to package to move up in order to get their man, which could be Shabazz Napier, albeit if it's influenced by LeBron James, or even Pat Riley has said on different media media outlets that he does have an interest in Shabazz Napier. But given where they're sitting at, if they can't get their man, it could be more to their benefit to trade back down. Because listen, the best time to do it would be in this year's draft. The 2014 draft is by far going to be one of the deepest drafts. Whether or not that completely pans out to these guys being, part of the NBA family for the next 5 or 6 years, but for right now, as what we're looking at, and based on the projections and the scouts and what they have said, the Miami Heat can still be in a very good position to fill the needs that they need to, regardless of having to wait with what will happen to the big three should Wade and Bosh not decide to opt in, should they decide to opt out. And then we have to wait around July the 1st and thereafter for us to see where the Miami Heat will finally stand as a team, as a completed roster when it's all said and done. Diego, man, awesome show, man. I really appreciate you coming on and helping kind of give insight to our fans and our followers with the status of LeBron James and the Miami Heat. I know that you're definitely looking forward to this. I hope you ain't got no vacation time coming up, man, because you might be on the clock a little bit there.
Yeah, it's all good. I mean, thanks for having me on. It's been a pleasure, and I will be here. So if anything happens, I will be here. You can check me out, and hopefully we'll see the big three stay in Miami. But if not, I'll still be here. I'm not one of those fans who would do something like leave Game 6 early and try to come back into the arena after Ray Allen hits that big three-pointer.
And that is
like that. Yeah.
That is why you are a soldier. You are a dedicated soldier. You are like Maximus Aurelius right there, my friend.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to switch up on this. Let's not confuse the many for the few. I think I got that right. Because, I mean, a lot of Heat fans are bad, but some of them are not so bad.
I know.
I try to tell people.
And believe me, they will thank you for it. What do they say? Win the crowd, and you'll win your freedom. My friend, you have won your freedom.
All right.
So for the full court press, Cal Lee and our special guest Diego Quezada for Ha Ha Hoops. Make sure to check him out at Diego Heat NBA. Keep checking them out, man, and continue to keep keeping with us as we give you the goods on everything that's going on with the NBA. This is the Full Court Press. Check us out later.